Hey guys, for this next review, I'm gonna hit probably one of, if not the best book in the Vampire Chronicles series, and that is The Vampire Lestat. What can be said about this book that hasn't been said already? I mean, this one's a classic, if not better than Interview with a Vampire, depending on your preference. Because it goes into detail about Interview with a Vampire, so what this story is about Rockstar Lestat, like the movie Queen of the Damned. And he decides, since Louis gave his story about the events that unfolded, Lestat wanted to set the story straight and give the real reasons of what happened, and then some. He tells about his life, and he goes into his life of when he was French royalty, and how all he ever wanted to do with his life was not be royalty, but go off to Paris and become an actor. He wanted nothing more than be an actor. Until he decided to run away and do that, until he was kidnapped by Magnus, not Marius, and became a vampire. And his life changed. For the better or worse, that's up to the reader. But he comes to terms with what he is, way better than Louis does. Louis takes way longer to get into being a vampire than Lestat did. Now, a plus that Lestat liked about being a vampire is that he could save his mother, Gabrielle. Gabrielle was dying of a sickness. I don't remember exactly, but it's probably cancer or something like that. It may have been. But he decides to turn his mother into a vampire who embraces being a vampire even more than Lestat did, because she loves the power that comes along with it, especially during this time. And so it goes through that story of how he became the vampire Lestat that we all know and love, and how he became through Magnus, not Marius. And how, here's one of the big ones, is that you find out, spoiler, that he started the Théâtre du Vampire, or however you say it in France, the Theater of the Vampires, before Armand. So Armand did not start what was known in Interview with a Vampire, and pretty much Lestat gave it to him and taught him how to be the vampire that he becomes, because at the time Armand was the traditional vampire in the stories. He was afraid of crosses, because it was more of a myth that the vampires believed that crosses were bad and vampires were evil, so they believed that myth. And so Armand had a group of vampires that believed that, and he taught the same lesson to as well. And Lestat helped clear all that myth. And what's interesting about this book also is that Lestat gives the true, correct version of the story that Louis told in Interview with the Vampire. In Interview with the Vampire, Lestat is the bad guy, which was the original obvious idea at the time. But this book takes it to where Lestat wasn't bad, and you find out that the victims that he was killing in the original novel Interview with the Vampire, the victims were thieves, murderers, and bad people. He only killed bad people because the bad people taste better. So that was his reasoning behind it. And so, looking back in the original novel, you see it paints him as a good guy now, and Louis didn't know that at the time. So it completely repaints Lestat as the hero now, and that he stays the entire series in the books that he's actually in. And it all leads up to Lestat being the rock star, and the big concert before the big fight that you see in the film. Book's awesome. Can't say enough about it. At the time when I didn't know any better, I was kind of disappointed and sad that this is the only book where Lestat is a rock star. For those that don't know, he gives it up and retires after this book. And I was a little sad at the time, but as the series goes on, you see it was way one-dimensional if they kept him a rock star the entire series. And it's a good thing that he dropped it for what he eventually became. So if you love Lestat, like I said, it's the second book, but it changed the entire flow of the series of where it would go. making the villain the hero, and it was his redemption story once you find out what it was really going on behind the scenes. When he gave his side of the story, and he wasn't lying, he was actually telling the truth of what actually happened. So you don't have to think that he's lying to get you to like him. He's actually telling the truth and telling things that, like I said, Louis didn't know in the original book. So it adds more myth to the universe that is the Vampire Chronicles. And that's what's so cool about this series just in general, is that each book adds another layer to this huge universe that there is now. And this is the first book that really took one single story and started turning it into a universe, adding more vampires and just expanding it. And vampires that show up in this book show up later in the series, and that's when you start seeing more. Well, Interview on the Vampire, it does that as well, but more vampires that show up. That'll show up later on. So overall, 5 out of 5, still gold. Awesome book, love it. Check it out, and I'll see you later, guys. Bye.